It was a chilly evening in a small, quiet town. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few cars passing by and the occasional pedestrian hurrying home to escape the cold. A young boy, around 16 years old, was walking down the sidewalk, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets to keep warm. He had just finished his part-time job at a local diner and was on his way home. The boy wasn't particularly tall or athletic, but he had a kind face and a thoughtful demeanor. He was the type of person who noticed things others might overlook, like the tired look on the faces of the two police officers sitting in their patrol car outside the diner. The boy had seen these officers around town before. They were always polite, always doing their jobs with a sense of duty. But tonight, they looked exhausted. It had been a long day for everyone, and the boy could tell they hadn't had a proper meal in hours. He paused for a moment, thinking about what he could do. He didn't have much money, just the small amount he'd earned from his shift, but he felt compelled to do something kind. After a moment of hesitation, he turned around and walked back into the diner. Inside, the diner was warm and smelled of freshly brewed coffee and fried food. The boy approached the counter and asked the cook to prepare 2 large meals to go. He didn't explain why, just said it was important. The cook, used to the boy's quiet nature, didn't ask questions and got to work. A few minutes later, the boy walked out of the diner with 2 steaming hot bags of food. He approached the patrol car cautiously, not wanting to startle the officers. They looked up as he approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. The boy smiled nervously and held out the bags. "I thought you might be hungry," he said simply. The officers were taken aback. They hadn't expected this kind of gesture, especially not from a teenager. One of them, the older of the two, smiled warmly and accepted the food. "Thank you, son," he said. "This means a lot." The boy nodded, feeling a little embarrassed but also happy. He didn't stick around for long, just wished them a good night and continued on his way home. The officers watched him go, both touched by his kindness. They didn't know his name or his story, but they wouldn't forget what he had done. The next day, the boy was at home, helping his mother with chores. They lived in a modest house on the edge of town, and life wasn't always easy for them. Money was tight, and they had to work hard to make ends meet. But the boy never complained. He was grateful for what they had and always tried to do his part. As he was folding laundry, there was a knock at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, so he was surprised when he opened the door to find the 2 police officers standing there. The boy's heart skipped a beat. Had he done something wrong? But the officers' expressions were friendly, even grateful. The older one spoke first. "We wanted to come by and thank you properly for what you did last night," he said. "It's not every day someone goes out of their way to do something like that." The boy relaxed and smiled. "It was nothing," he said. "I just thought you might be hungry." The officers exchanged a glance, and the younger one spoke up. "It wasn't nothing," he said. "It was a really kind thing to do. And we wanted to do something in return." The boy was confused. What could they possibly want to do for him? The older officer reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you," he said, handing it to the boy. "It's not much, but we hope it helps." The boy opened the envelope and his eyes widened. Inside was a small amount of cash, enough to make a real difference for him and his mother. He looked up at the officers, speechless. "We took up a collection at the station," the younger officer explained. "Everyone chipped in a little. We know things aren't easy for you, and we wanted to help." The boy didn't know what to say. He felt tears welling up in his eyes but blinked them away. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The officers smiled and nodded. "You're a good kid," the older one said. "Don't ever change." As they walked back to their patrol car, the boy stood in the doorway, clutching the envelope. He felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, humility, and a renewed sense of hope. He hadn't expected anything in return for his small act of kindness, but the officer's gesture had touched him deeply. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. That night, as he sat down to dinner with his mother, the boy told her what had happened. She listened quietly, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm so proud of you," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "You have a good heart, and that's the most important thing." The boy smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the food in front of him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: no matter what challenges came his way, he would always try to do the right thing. And maybe, just maybe, his small acts of kindness could make a difference in the world. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would change his life, and the lives of those around him, in ways he could never have imagined. But for now, he was content to sit with his mother, enjoying the simple pleasure of a warm meal and the knowledge that he had done something good. The days following the officer's visit were quiet but meaningful for the boy. The small amount of money they had given him was a blessing, and he used it wisely. He helped his mother pay a few bills and bought some groceries, making sure to stretch every dollar as far as it could go. Life didn't change overnight. But the gesture had given him a renewed sense of hope. He felt a little lighter, a little more optimistic about the future. Word of what had happened began to spread around town. The officers had shared the story with their colleagues at the station, and soon it reached the ears of others in the community. People were touched by the boy's kindness and the officer's response. It was a small story, but in a town where everyone knew everyone else, it was the kind of thing that stuck with people. One afternoon, as the boy was walking home from school, he noticed a few people smiling at him or nodding in his direction. At first, he didn't think much of it, but then an older woman stopped him on the street. "You're the boy who bought those officers dinner, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. The boy nodded, feeling a little shy. The woman smiled warmly. "That was such a kind thing to do," she said. "It's nice to see young people like you making a difference." The boy thanked her and continued on his way, but the encounter left him feeling both proud and a little overwhelmed. He hadn't expected his small act of kindness to get so much attention. He wasn't used to being noticed, and it felt strange to have people talking about him. Still, he couldn't deny that it felt good to know he had made a positive impact. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The boy was at work at the diner, wiping down tables during a slow moment, when the bell above the door jingled. He looked up to see a man in a suit walking in. The man looked around for a moment before his eyes landed on the boy. "Are you the young man who treated those officers to dinner?" he asked. The boy nodded, unsure of what to expect. The man smiled and extended his hand. "I'm the owner of the hardware store down the street," he said. "I heard about what you did, and I wanted to come by and thank you personally. It's not every day you see someone your age doing something so selfless." The boy shook the man's hand, feeling a little awkward but also grateful. "It was nothing, really," he said. "I just thought they might be hungry." The man chuckled. "Well, it meant a lot to them, and to the rest of us. In fact, I'd like to do something for you in return." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gift card. "This is for my store. It's not much, but I hope it helps." The boy was stunned. He hadn't expected anything like this. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "This is really kind of you." The man waved off the thanks. "You're the one who started this whole thing," he said. "Just keep being the good person you are." As the days went by, more small acts of kindness came the boy's way. A neighbor dropped off a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden. A teacher at school gave him a book she thought he might enjoy. Even the owner of the diner where he worked gave him a small raise, saying he deserved it for his hard work and good heart. The boy was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. He had never expected anything like this to happen. He had simply done what felt right in the moment, and now it seemed like the whole town was rallying around him. It was a humbling experience, and it made him realize just how much of an impact one small act of kindness could have. But not everyone in town was happy about the attention the boy was receiving. There were a few people who felt jealous or resentful, thinking that he didn't deserve all the praise he was getting. One day, as the boy was walking home from work, he overheard a group of teenagers talking about him. "Why's everyone making such a big deal about him?" one of them said. "It's not like he did anything special." The boy's heart sank. He hadn't asked for any of this attention, and he certainly didn't want to make anyone feel bad. He quickened his pace, trying to ignore the comments, but they stayed with him long after he got home. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about what had happened. He knew he couldn't control how people felt or what they said about him, but he also knew that he didn't want to let their negativity change who he was. He had always tried to be kind and thoughtful, and he wasn't going to stop now just because some people didn't understand. The next day, he decided to do something to pay forward all the kindness he had received. He used the gift card from the hardware store owner to buy some supplies, and then he spent the afternoon fixing up an old bench in the park. It was something small, but he knew it would make a difference for the people who used the park. As he worked, a few people stopped to watch and ask what he was doing. When he explained, they smiled and thanked him. One man even offered to help, and together they finished the job. By the time they were done, the bench looked as good as new. The boy stepped back to admire their work, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He hadn't done it for recognition or praise, he had done it because it felt like the right thing to do. And that, he realized, was what mattered most. As he walked home that evening, he felt a sense of peace. He knew there would always be people who didn't understand or who tried to bring him down, but he also knew that he had the power to make a difference in his own way. And as long as he stayed true to himself, he would be okay. The boy's story was far from over, and there were still challenges ahead. But for now, he was content to keep doing what he could to spread kindness and make the world a little brighter, one small act at a time. The boy's act of fixing the park bench didn't go unnoticed. Over the next few days, more people in the town began to talk about it. Some had seen him working on it, while others had simply noticed the bench looked new and wondered who had taken the time to repair it. When they found out it was the same boy who had bought the officers' dinner, the story spread even further. It was as if the town had found a small beacon of hope in him, a reminder that even in tough times, kindness could still flourish. One evening, as the boy was walking home from the park, he noticed a group of kids playing soccer in an empty lot. They were laughing and shouting, their voices carrying through the crisp autumn air. He stopped for a moment to watch, feeling a pang of longing. He had always loved soccer but hadn't played in years. Life had been too busy, and he hadn't had the time or the equipment to join a team. As he stood there, one of the kids kicked the ball too hard, and it rolled toward him. The boy instinctively stopped it with his foot and kicked it back. The kids waved and called out, "Thanks." He waved back and continued on his way, but the encounter stayed with him. He couldn't help but think about how much fun it would be to play again. The next day, something unexpected happened. The boy was at work at the diner when the owner approached him with a smile. "I heard about what you did at the park," he said. "Fixing that bench was a really nice thing to do." The boy shrugged modestly. "It was nothing," he said. "I just thought it could use some work." The owner nodded. "Well, it got me thinking. You've been doing a lot for this town, and I want to do something for you in return." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. Use it however you want." The boy opened the envelope and his eyes widened. Inside was enough money to buy a new soccer ball, cleats, and even a jersey. He looked up at the owner, speechless. I don't know what to say," he stammered. The owner chuckled. You don't have to say anything. Just keep being the good kid you are. That weekend, the boy used the money to buy the soccer gear he had been dreaming of. He couldn't wait to join the kids in the empty lot and play again. But as he walked toward the lot with his new ball under his arm, he noticed something that made him pause. The kids were there, but they weren't playing. Instead, they were sitting on the ground, looking dejected. The boy approached them cautiously. What's wrong? He asked. One of the kids looked up at him. Our ball popped, he said, holding up a deflated soccer ball. We can't play anymore. The boy hesitated for a moment, then held out his new ball. Here, he said. You can use this one. The kids' eyes lit up, and they jumped to their feet. Really? One of them asked. The boy nodded. Yeah, really. But only if I can play too. The kids cheered and quickly divided into teams. For the next hour, they played together, laughing and shouting as they ran across the lot. The boy felt a joy he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just the game, it was the sense of connection, of being part of something bigger than himself. As the sun began to set, the kids gathered around him. Thanks for letting us use your ball, one of them said. You're really good at soccer. The boy smiled. Thanks. Maybe we can play again sometime. The kids nodded eagerly, and as they walked away, the boy felt a sense of fulfillment. He hadn't planned to give away his new ball, but seeing the joy it brought to the kids made it worth it. He knew he could always save up for another one later. The next day, the boy was back at work at the diner when the bell above the door jingled. He looked up to see the same group of kids walking in, accompanied by their parents. They approached the counter, and one of the parents smiled at him. We heard about what you did for our kids, she said. It was such a kind thing to do. We wanted to come by and thank you. The boy felt a warmth spread through him. It was nothing, he said. I just wanted to help. The parents exchanged a glance, and one of them reached into their bag and pulled out a brand new soccer ball. We got this for you, they said. We thought you might like to have your own. The boy was stunned. He hadn't expected anything in return, and the gesture touched him deeply. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. This means a lot. The parents smiled. You've done a lot for this town, one of them said. It's nice to see someone your age making such a difference. As the days went by, the boy continued to find ways to spread kindness. He helped an elderly neighbor carry her groceries, volunteered to clean up the park, and even started a small soccer club for the kids in the neighborhood. Each act was small, but together they added up to something bigger. But not everyone in town was happy about the attention the boy was receiving. There were still a few people who felt jealous or resentful, and they began to spread rumors about him. They said he was only doing these things for attention, that he didn't really care about the town. The boy tried to ignore the rumors, but they hurt more than he wanted to admit. One evening, as he was walking home from the park, he ran into one of the officers who had first inspired his journey. The officer smiled when he saw him. I've been hearing a lot about you, he said. You've been busy. The boy nodded, feeling a mix of pride and uncertainty. I've been trying to help where I can, he said. The officer studied him for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't let anyone tell you that what you're doing doesn't matter, he said. You're making a real difference, and that's something to be proud of. The boy felt a lump form in his throat. Thank you, he said. That means a lot. The officer smiled. Just keep being you. That's all anyone can ask for. As the boy walked home that evening, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew there would always be people who didn't understand or who tried to bring him down, but he also knew that he had the power to make a difference. And as long as he stayed true to himself, he would be okay. The boy's story was far from over, and there were still challenges ahead. But for now, he was content to keep doing what he could to spread kindness and make the world a little brighter, one small act at a time. The boys' soccer club quickly became a popular activity in the neighborhood. Every evening after school, kids from all over the area would gather in the empty lot to play. The boy organized the games, making sure everyone had a chance to participate and feel included. It wasn't just about soccer, it was about creating a sense of community, a place where kids could come together and have fun. One afternoon, as the boy was setting up for the game, he noticed a new face in the crowd. A younger boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old, was standing at the edge of the lot, watching nervously. He looked like he wanted to join but was too shy to ask. The boy walked over and smiled. "Hey, do you want to play?" he asked. The younger boy hesitated, then nodded. "I've never played before," he admitted. "That's okay," the boy said. "We'll teach you. Everyone starts somewhere." He introduced the younger boy to the group, and they welcomed him with open arms. By the end of the game, the boy was laughing and running with the others, his initial shyness completely gone. The boy felt a swell of pride. It was moments like these that made all the effort worth it. But not everyone in the town was supportive of the soccer club. Some of the older residents complained about the noise, while others thought the lot should be used for something more productive. One evening, as the boy was packing up after a game, a man approached him. He was tall and stern-looking, with a frown on his face. "You're the one organizing these games, aren't you?" the man asked. The boy nodded, feeling a little nervous. "Yes, sir," he said. "We're just trying to have some fun." The man crossed his arms. "Well, it's too loud. People are trying to relax in their homes, and all they can hear is you kids shouting and running around." The boy felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't realized they were causing a disturbance. "I'm sorry," he said. "We didn't mean to bother anyone. We'll try to keep it down." The man's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that," he said. "But maybe you should find somewhere else to play. This lot isn't meant for soccer." The boy nodded, but inside he felt a sense of frustration. The empty lot was the only place they had to play, and he didn't know where else they could go. As he walked home that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about the man's words. He didn't want to cause trouble, but he also didn't want to give up on the soccer club. It meant too much to the kids, and to him. The next day, the boy decided to take action. He went to the town hall and asked to speak with someone about finding a new place for the soccer club. At first, he was met with skepticism. The officials didn't think a teenager could be serious about something like this. But the boy was persistent. He explained how much the club meant to the kids and how it was bringing the community together. Slowly, he began to win them over. One of the officials, a kind woman with a warm smile, listened carefully to his story. "You've done a lot for this town," she said. "It's impressive to see someone your age taking initiative like this. Let me see what I can do." A few days later, the boy received some good news. The town had agreed to let the soccer club use a small field on the outskirts of town. It wasn't perfect, it needed some work, but it was a start. The boy was thrilled. He immediately gathered the kids and told them the news. They cheered and high-fived, excited to have a real place to play. Over the next few weeks, the boy and the kids worked together to clean up the field. They pulled weeds, picked up trash, and even painted the goalposts. It was hard work, but it brought them closer together. By the time they were done, the field looked like a proper soccer pitch. The first game on the new field was a big event. Parents came to watch, and even some of the town officials showed up. The boy felt a sense of pride as he watched the kids play. They were laughing and smiling, completely in their element. It was a reminder of why he had started the club in the first place. But not everyone was happy about the new field. The man who had complained about the noise in the empty lot was still skeptical. He showed up at the field one evening, his arms crossed and a frown on his face. The boy noticed him and walked over, feeling a little nervous. "I see you found a new place to play," the man said. The boy nodded. "Yes, sir. The town let us use this field. We've been working hard to clean it up." The man looked around, taking in the freshly painted goalposts and the neatly trimmed grass. He said. "It looks better than I expected." The boy smiled. "We're trying to be respectful of the community. We don't want to cause any trouble." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Well, you've done a good job here. I'll admit, I was wrong about you. Keep it up." The boy felt a swell of pride. It wasn't easy to win over someone who had been so critical, but he had done it by staying true to himself and his values. As the man walked away, the boy returned to the game, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The soccer club continued to grow, and the boy found himself becoming a leader in the community. People looked up to him, not just because of what he had done, but because of the way he did it, with kindness, humility, and a genuine desire to make a difference. But the boy knew there were still challenges ahead. The field needed more work, and there were always new obstacles to overcome. Still, he was determined to keep going. He had seen firsthand how much of an impact one person could have, and he wasn't going to stop now. As he walked home that evening, the boy thought about everything that had happened. It had been a long journey, but it was far from over. He knew there would be more ups and downs, more people to win over, and more kindness to spread. But he was ready for whatever came next. The boy's story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of small acts of kindness. He had started with a simple gesture, buying dinner for 2 tired officers, and it had grown into something much bigger. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. And as long as there were people like the boy, that goodness would continue to grow. The soccer club had become a cornerstone of the community, and the boy's efforts were paying off in ways he hadn't imagined. The field, once overgrown and neglected, was now a vibrant space filled with laughter and energy. Parents often came to watch the games, bringing snacks and cheering loudly from the sidelines. The boy had even started organizing small tournaments, inviting teams from nearby neighborhoods to join. It was more than just a place to play soccer, it was a place where people came together, where friendships were formed, and where the town felt a little more connected. But as the club grew, so did the responsibilities. The boy found himself spending more and more time organizing games, maintaining the field, and handling the logistics of the tournaments. It was a lot for someone his age, and he often felt overwhelmed. Still, he didn't complain. He loved seeing the joy the club brought to the kids, and that made all the hard work worth it. One evening, after a particularly long day of organizing a tournament, the boy was walking home when he noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the field. It was the older police officer who had first inspired him to start this journey. The officer looked up and smiled as the boy approached. "Mind if I join you?" the boy asked. The officer shook his head. "Not at all. Have a seat." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the sun set over the field. Finally, the officer spoke. "You've done a lot since we last talked," he said. "This field, the club, the tournaments, it's impressive." The boy shrugged modestly. "I just wanted to give the kids a place to play," he said. "It's not a big deal." The officer chuckled. "Don't sell yourself short. What you've done here is a big deal. You've brought this town together in a way I haven't seen in years." The boy felt a warmth spread through him. It was nice to hear that his efforts were making a difference. "Thanks," he said. "That means a lot." The officer nodded. "But I have to ask, how are you holding up? This is a lot for one person to handle." The boy hesitated. He didn't want to admit how tired he was, how much he was struggling to keep up with everything. But something about the officer's kind expression made him open up. "It's a lot," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm in over my head. But I don't want to let anyone down." The officer placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not in this alone, you know. There are people who want to help. You just have to let them." The boy thought about that for a moment. He had always been so focused on doing everything himself that he hadn't considered asking for help. But maybe the officer was right. Maybe he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. The next day, the boy decided to take the officer's advice. He called a meeting with the parents and kids from the soccer club and explained how he was feeling. "I love what we've built here," he said. "But I can't do it all by myself. I need your help to keep it going." The response was overwhelming. Parents volunteered to help with organizing games and maintaining the field. Older kids offered to coach the younger ones. Even some of the town officials stepped in, offering to help with permits and supplies. The boy was touched by the outpouring of support. It was a reminder that he wasn't alone, that the community was behind him. With the extra help, the soccer club began to thrive even more. The boy still worked hard, but he no longer felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had more time to enjoy the games, to laugh with the kids, and to simply be a part of the community he had helped build. But not everything was smooth sailing. One afternoon, as the boy was setting up for a game, he noticed a group of older teenagers hanging around the edge of the field. They were loud and disruptive, and it was clear they weren't there to play soccer. The boy felt a pang of unease. He didn't want any trouble, but he also didn't want to let the kids down. He approached the group cautiously. "Hey, can I help you?" he asked. One of the teenagers, a tall boy with a smirk on his face, stepped forward. "We just wanted to check out the field," he said. "Heard a lot about it." The boy nodded. "Well, we're about to start a game. You're welcome to join if you want." The teenager laughed. "We're not here to play soccer. We're here to have some fun." He emphasized the last word in a way that made the boy's stomach twist. Before the boy could respond, one of the parents from the soccer club stepped in. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice firm. The teenagers exchanged glances, then shrugged. "Nah, no problem," the tall one said. "We were just leaving." As they walked away, the boy felt a mix of relief and frustration. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but he also didn't want to let anyone ruin what they had built. The parent placed a hand on his shoulder. "You handled that well," she said. "But don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. We're all in this together." The boy nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He knew there would always be challenges, but he also knew he had the support of the community. And as long as they worked together, they could overcome anything. That evening, as the boy walked home, he thought about everything that had happened. The soccer club had come a long way, but there was still so much more to do. He knew there would be more obstacles, more people to win over, and more kindness to spread. But he was ready for whatever came next. The boy's story was a testament to the power of community and the impact of small acts of kindness. He had started with a simple gesture, buying dinner for 2 tired officers, and it had grown into something much bigger. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. And as long as there were people like the boy, that goodness would continue to grow. The soccer club had become a symbol of unity in the town, and the boy's efforts were celebrated by many. But as the club grew, so did the challenges. The incident with the disruptive teenagers was just the beginning. The boy knew that maintaining the field and keeping the club running smoothly would require even more effort and collaboration. He also realized that not everyone in the town was on board with what he was trying to do. Some people still saw the soccer club as a nuisance, while others felt left out or overlooked. One day, as the boy was walking to the field, he noticed a group of younger kids sitting on the sidelines, watching the older kids play. They looked eager to join but hesitant to ask. The boy recognized that look. It was the same one he had seen on the face of the shy boy who had first joined the club months ago. He walked over and smiled. "Hey, why aren't you guys playing?" he asked. One of the kids, a small boy with glasses, looked up at him. "We're not good enough," he said quietly. "The older kids are too fast." The boy's heart sank. He had worked so hard to create a space where everyone felt welcome, and now he realized that some kids still felt excluded. He knelt down to their level. "You don't have to be the best to play," he said. "Soccer is about having fun and being part of a team. Let's start a game just for you guys." The kids' faces lit up, and soon the boy was organizing a smaller, more relaxed game for the younger kids. He made sure to keep the pace slow and the rules simple, so everyone could participate. By the end of the game, the kids were laughing and cheering, their initial hesitation completely gone. But the boy knew this was only a temporary solution. If the soccer club was going to be truly inclusive, he needed to find a way to make sure everyone felt welcome, regardless of their age or skill level. He decided to bring up the issue at the next parents' meeting. That evening, the boy stood in front of the group of parents and explained what he had noticed. "We need to make sure every kid feels like they belong here," he said. "Maybe we can divide the games by age or skill level, so everyone has a chance to play." The parents nodded in agreement, and soon they were brainstorming ideas. One parent suggested creating different time slots for different age groups, while another offered to organize a skills workshop for the younger kids. The boy felt a sense of relief. Once again, the community was stepping up to help. Over the next few weeks, the soccer club became even more organized. The field was divided into sections, with games for different age groups happening at different times. The boy also started a mentorship program, where older kids helped coach the younger ones. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it to see the smiles on the kids' faces. But not everyone was happy about the changes. One afternoon, as the boy was setting up for a game, he noticed a group of older kids standing at the edge of the field, looking annoyed. He recognized them as some of the more skilled players who had been part of the club from the beginning. One of them, a tall boy with a confident stride, walked over to him. "Why are we getting less time on the field now?" he asked. "We've been here since the beginning, and now we have to share with a bunch of little kids?" The boy took a deep breath. He had been expecting this kind of pushback. "I get it," he said. "You guys are really good, and you've worked hard to get where you are. But this club is for everyone, not just the best players. We need to make sure everyone feels included." The older boy crossed his arms. "But it's not fair. We're the ones who made this club popular, and now we're getting pushed aside." The boy shook his head. "You're not getting pushed aside. You're still a big part of this club. But we need to make room for others too. That's what being part of a community is all about." The older boy didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue further. He walked away, muttering under his breath. The boy felt a pang of frustration. He didn't want to alienate anyone, but he also couldn't let a few people dictate how the club was run. Later that evening, the boy decided to talk to the older kids one-on-one. He wanted to hear their concerns and explain his perspective. It wasn't an easy conversation, but by the end of it, the older kids seemed to understand where he was coming from. "We just want to feel like we're still important," one of them admitted. The boy nodded. "You are important," he said. "And we'll find a way to make sure you still get the time and attention you deserve. But we also need to make room for others. That's how we grow." The older kids agreed to give the new system a try, and over time, they began to see the benefits. They enjoyed mentoring the younger kids and took pride in being role models. The boy felt a sense of satisfaction. Once again, he had managed to turn a challenge into an opportunity. But the boy knew there would always be new obstacles to overcome. The field needed constant maintenance, and the club's growing popularity meant more kids wanted to join. The boy also had to balance his responsibilities with school and work, which wasn't always easy. There were days when he felt completely drained, but he kept going because he believed in what he was doing. One evening, as the boy was walking home after a long day, he ran into the older police officer again. The officer smiled when he saw him. "You look tired," he said. "Everything okay?" The boy nodded. "Just a lot going on," he admitted. "But it's worth it." The officer studied him for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing a great job," he said. "But don't forget to take care of yourself too. You can't pour from an empty cup." The boy smiled. "Thanks. I'll try to remember that." As he walked home, the boy thought about the officer's words. He knew he couldn't keep going at this pace forever. He needed to find a way to balance his responsibilities and take time for himself. But for now, he was content to keep doing what he could to spread kindness and make the world a little brighter, one small act at a time. The boy's story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of small acts of kindness. He had started with a simple gesture, buying dinner for 2 tired officers, and it had grown into something much bigger. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. And as long as there were people like the boy, that goodness would continue to grow. The soccer club had become a cornerstone of the town, but the boy was beginning to feel the weight of his responsibilities. Between school, work, and managing the club, he was stretched thin. He tried to keep a smile on his face, but deep down, he was exhausted. The older police officer's words echoed in his mind, "You can't pour from an empty cup." The boy knew he needed to find a way to recharge, but he didn't know how. One evening, after a particularly long day, the boy sat on the edge of the soccer field, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The field was empty now, the laughter and shouts of the kids replaced by the quiet chirping of crickets. He felt a sense of peace, but also a deep weariness. He loved what he had built, but he couldn't ignore the toll it was taking on him. As he sat there, lost in thought, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see one of the parents from the club walking toward him. It was the same woman who had stepped in when the older teenagers had caused trouble. She sat down beside him and smiled. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," she said. The boy nodded. "It's just a lot sometimes," he admitted. "I don't want to let anyone down, but I feel like I'm running on empty." The woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done so much for this town," she said. "But you don't have to do it all by yourself. Let us help you." The boy sighed. "I know. I just feel like if I don't keep pushing, everything will fall apart." The woman shook her head. "That's not true. This club, this community, it's bigger than just you. You've inspired so many people to step up and take responsibility. Let them." Her words struck a chord with the boy. He realized that he had been so focused on being the one to fix everything that he hadn't fully trusted others to share the load. Maybe it was time to let go a little and allow the community to take more ownership. The next day, the boy called a meeting with the parents and older kids from the club. He stood in front of them and took a deep breath. "I need to be honest with you," he said. "I've been feeling really overwhelmed lately. I love this club, and I love what we've built together, but I can't do it all by myself anymore." The room was silent as everyone listened intently. The boy continued. "I need your help. I need you to take on more responsibility, not just with the games, but with everything. We need to work together to keep this club going." The response was immediate. Parents volunteered to take on specific roles, like scheduling games and maintaining the field. Older kids offered to organize practices and mentor the younger players. Even some of the town officials stepped in, offering to help with fundraising and logistics. The boy felt a weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt like he wasn't carrying the burden alone. With the extra help, the soccer club began to run more smoothly. The boy still played a key role, but he no longer felt like everything depended on him. He had more time to focus on school and work, and he even started to take some time for himself. He realized that taking care of himself wasn't selfish, it was necessary if he wanted to keep making a difference. But even with the extra support, challenges still arose. One afternoon, as the boy was walking to the field, he noticed a group of kids sitting on the sidelines, looking upset. He walked over and asked what was wrong. One of the kids, a girl with braided hair, looked up at him. "We don't have enough equipment," she said. "Some of the balls are old and deflated, and we don't have enough cones for practice." The boy frowned. He hadn't realized how much the equipment had deteriorated. He knew they didn't have the money to replace everything, but he also didn't want the kids to miss out because of it. He decided to bring up the issue at the next parents' meeting. That evening, the boy stood in front of the group and explained the problem. "We need to find a way to get new equipment," he said. "But we don't have the funds right now. Does anyone have any ideas?" The room was quiet for a moment, then one of the parents raised their hand. "What if we organized a fundraiser?" they suggested. "We could have a bake sale or a car wash. Maybe even a community soccer tournament where people can donate to participate." The boy's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea," he said. "Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, the community came together to organize the fundraiser. Parents baked cookies and cakes, kids made posters to spread the word, and local businesses donated prizes for the tournament. The boy was amazed by how quickly everything came together. It was a reminder of how much the club meant to the town. The day of the fundraiser was a huge success. The field was packed with people, and the air was filled with laughter and excitement. The boy watched as kids played soccer, parents cheered from the sidelines, and everyone came together to support the club. By the end of the day, they had raised enough money to buy new equipment and even make some improvements to the field. As the sun set and the crowd began to disperse, the boy stood on the field, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude. He had started this journey with a simple act of kindness, and now it had grown into something much bigger. It wasn't just about soccer anymore, it was about community, connection, and the power of working together. But the boy knew there were still challenges ahead. The club would continue to grow, and there would always be new obstacles to overcome. Still, he felt ready to face whatever came next. He had learned that he didn't have to do it all by himself, that the community was behind him, ready to help. As he walked home that evening, the boy thought about everything that had happened. He had come a long way since that chilly night when he had bought dinner for two tired officers. He had faced challenges, made mistakes, and learned valuable lessons. But through it all, he had stayed true to himself and his values. The boy's story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of small acts of kindness. He had started with a simple gesture, and it had grown into something much bigger. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. And as long as there were people like the boy, that goodness would continue to grow. The fundraiser had been a turning point for the soccer club and for the boy. It wasn't just about the money they had raised, it was about the sense of unity and purpose it had brought to the town. People who had once been strangers now greeted each other by name, and the soccer field had become a gathering place for families and friends. The boy felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished together, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. There was still more work to be done, and he was determined to keep moving forward. One crisp autumn afternoon, the boy was at the field, helping set up for a community tournament. The air was filled with excitement as kids and parents arrived, carrying snacks, water bottles, and soccer gear. The boy was busy organizing teams when he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was the older police officer who had first inspired him to start this journey. The officer waved and walked over, a smile on his face. "Looks like you've been busy," the officer said, gesturing to the bustling field. The boy grinned. "Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it's worth it. Everyone's been so supportive." The officer nodded. "You've done something really special here. This town needed something like this, a place where people can come together and feel like they belong." The boy felt a swell of emotion. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had started all of this in the first place. "Thanks," he said. "That means a lot coming from you." The officer clapped him on the shoulder. "Just remember, this is your legacy. Whatever happens in the future, you've already made a difference." The boy thought about those words as the tournament got underway. He watched as kids of all ages played together, laughing and cheering each other on. Parents stood on the sidelines, chatting and sharing stories. It was a scene of pure joy and connection, and the boy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. But even as he celebrated the success of the club, the boy knew there were still challenges ahead. The field needed ongoing maintenance, and the club's growing popularity meant they needed more resources and volunteers. The boy also had to think about his own future. He was getting older, and soon he would be graduating from high school. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wanted to leave the club in good hands. One evening, as the boy was packing up after a game, he noticed a group of older kids huddled together, talking quietly. He recognized them as some of the club's most dedicated players, the ones who had been there from the beginning. He walked over and smiled. "What's going on?" he asked. One of the kids, a tall boy with a serious expression, looked up at him. "We've been talking," he said. "We know you're going to be leaving soon, and we want to make sure the club keeps going after you're gone." The boy felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't realized the older kids had been thinking about this too. "That's really great," he said. "What do you have in mind?" The kids explained their plan. They wanted to take on more responsibility, like organizing games and mentoring the younger players. They also wanted to start a leadership committee to make sure the club stayed on track. The boy listened intently, feeling a mix of pride and relief. He had been worried about what would happen to the club when he left, but now he felt confident that it was in good hands. Over the next few weeks, the boy worked with the older kids to transition them into leadership roles. He taught them how to organize games, handle logistics, and resolve conflicts. It wasn't always easy, there were moments of frustration and doubt, but the kids were determined to make it work. The boy felt a sense of pride as he watched them step up and take ownership of the club. As the weeks turned into months, the boy began to prepare for his own future. He had applied to a few colleges and was waiting to hear back. He didn't know where life would take him, but he knew he wanted to continue making a difference, no matter where he ended up. One evening, as the boy was walking home from the field, he ran into the older police officer again. The officer smiled when he saw him. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," he said. The boy nodded. "I've been thinking about the future," he admitted. "About what comes next." The officer studied him for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've already done so much," he said. "But this is just the beginning. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you'll keep making a difference. That's who you are." The boy felt a warmth spread through him. He had come a long way since that chilly night when he had bought dinner for two tired officers. He had faced challenges, made mistakes, and learned valuable lessons. But through it all, he had stayed true to himself and his values. As he walked home that evening, the boy thought about everything that had happened. The soccer club, the community, the friendships, it had all started with a simple act of kindness. It was a reminder that even in a world that could sometimes feel cold and uncaring, there was still goodness and compassion. And as long as there were people like the boy, that goodness would continue to grow. The boy's story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of small acts of kindness. He had started with a simple gesture, and it had grown into something much bigger. It was a reminder that even one person could make a difference, and that the ripple effects of kindness could touch countless lives. As the boy looked up at the stars, he felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he was ready for whatever came next. He had learned that life wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, it was about showing up, doing your best, and caring for the people around you. And as long as he stayed true to that, he knew he would be okay. The boy's journey was far from over, but he had already left a lasting legacy. He had shown his town, and himself, that even in the face of challenges, kindness and compassion could prevail. And as long as there were people like him, the world would always be a little brighter. This final part wraps up the boy's journey, showing